Okay, we're going to give it a couple, about a minute or so to let everybody come in, and then we'll get started. Hello and welcome to our webinar on choosing our climate legacy priorities for a more equitable and resilient Ohio with our guest panelists from all around Columbus. This is our last event of this semester. My name is Jerica Logan. I am the Outreach Coordinator at the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis, otherwise known as CURA. I will be your host for this event. If you require closed captioning, you will find a box at the bottom of the screen called CC. Click on the box and select Show Subtitles. This will allow you to see the subtitles during the presentation. Please feel free to submit questions at any time during the webinar in the Q&A box. We will ask as many of your questions as we can in the last portion of our presentation, and if we do not get to your question, we apologize. If you have any additional questions following the event, please feel free to email me at logan.433@osu.edu. This event is approved for one AICP CM, Equity and Sustainability and Resiliency credit. To claim your credits, log into your My APA account on the APA website and enter in the event into your online CM event log. There will also be a brief survey at the end of the webinar. If you have any time, please provide your feedback. I am now going to pass it over to our director, Harvey Miller.
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Miller. I'm Director of the Center for Urban Regional Analysis, and I welcome you to today's webinar. We've had a series this semester on choosing our climate legacy, priorities for a sustainable and resilient, or I should say equitable and resilient Ohio. And this is the last event in the series. And this is a panel of local thought and action leaders who will talk about how we're preparing Central Ohio for a hotter and wetter climate while keeping an eye on resilience and social equity issues. So welcome today. I do want to announce that we have a seminar series coming up, a webinar series, I should say, this summer. We're going to be doing a series of webinars on the impacts of Intel on Ohio. We're going to cover the themes of energy and water, housing, economic development, and transportation, and see how we should be preparing for this big behemoth, for lack of a better word, that's going to come to Central Ohio and really change things here. So pay attention to that. That's being organized even as we speak. Go to cura.osu.edu to sign up for our newsletter so you won't miss any of these exciting events. Also, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and I think we're on Instagram too. I'm not sure. I don't go near that, but there are many ways for you to keep in touch with CURA so you never miss any of these exciting events or opportunities. So as I said, we have an all-star panel of thought leaders and action leaders here in Central Ohio on the issues of climate adaptation, resilience, and social equity. And I'm going to introduce our four panelists. And after I introduce them, we're each going to give an opening statement of about 3 to 5 minutes in the order in which I introduce them. And then we'll open up for questions. I have a few questions we're gonna ask. We're also gonna hope to see some discussion among the panel. And I also encourage you to submit your own questions either in the chat or preferably in the Q&A window you see at the bottom of your window. And Jerica and I will get to those, and we'll throw them out to the panel. So here we go. And like I said, very excited. This is a great panel today. I'll start with Elena Irwin. She is a distinguished professor of food, agriculture, and environmental sciences in the Department of Agriculture, Environment, and Development Economics here at The Ohio State University, and is also the faculty director of the Sustainability Institute. Her research addresses the sustainability of human natural systems at the local and regional levels with a focus on land use and ecosystem services that span urban and regional areas. Thank you for joining us, Lena. Our next panelist is Erin Beck. She is the Assistant Sustainability Officer for Sustainable Columbus at the City of Columbus. Erin works interdepartmentally and with community stakeholders to impart equity, environmental, and racial justice through sustainability and climate actions. She leads critical efforts such as the city's 100% clean energy aggregation program, and is in the final phase of developing and launching the city's first ever Columbus Climate Action Plan. Thank you for joining us, Erin. We also have Kirsten Carr. She is the Chief Regional Strategy Officer and Senior Director of Planning at the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, better known as MORPC, here in Columbus, Ohio. Her team provides and promotes collaboration, facilitation, data and mapping support, and regional planning initiatives related to active transportation, the natural and built environment, and energy. And this is to benefit MORPC's members and communities across Central Ohio. Thank you, Kristen, for joining us. And last but certainly not least is Sandy Dell Ahern. She is president of EMH&T, one of Ohio's largest professional engineering and survey firms. Sandy joined EMH&T in 1997 and led the company's first environmental department. Today, she is responsible for the overall company management and focuses on client relationships, business development, quality control, and employee engagement. Thank you for joining us as well, Sandy. And we'll start with Elena. Please, your opening statement.
All right. Well, thank you, Harv. Thank you, Jerica. And it's really an honor and privilege to be here with this great panel. I appreciate everyone making the time and very eager to also hear questions and make this a dialogue as much as we can. So, this is a really compelling question. We all know that climate change is going to have extreme impacts going forward. It already has, and these will continue to worsen and with greater intensity in our society, in our communities, and worldwide. And so, this question of how do we make ourselves and our communities more resilient in the face of this increasing climate change impacts is absolutely the existential question, of our generation and generations to come. So, I thought I would start with just framing this with very broadly, and I apologize for the professor in me probably coming out, but I thought I might start with a question of, what does it even mean for a community or a city or a region to be resilient? What do we mean by just that concept of resiliency? And, there's really kind of two different ways of thinking about it. One comes from more of an engineering approach, thinking about bouncing back from something. So there's a shock, and the question is how much do we bounce back and kind of return to normal? The other one is much more of an adaptation and transformation kind of idea. It really comes actually from ecology. So the ecological definition of resilience has to do with more, how do we as a society or as systems adapt and transform in the face of change that may be persistent. It could be a shock or it could be a persistent change. And how do we do that in a way that continues to support human well-being, protect our ecological resources, and promote a just and equitable society? So, I think both these definitions are relevant for us today, and I thought I would just start with laying those out. So, as we've done some research looking at, what is it that might contribute to communities' ability to be adaptable and to be resilient. And it turns out that the same kinds of things that contribute to more of a long-term sustainability of the community also contribute to its resilience. And one way to think about this is in terms of the inclusive, what sometimes is called, economists call inclusive wealth of a community. So if you think about all the different kinds of capital that exists within a community, there's natural capital, there's financial capital, there's built capital, which would include all the infrastructure and buildings that we have, the housing, et cetera. Of course, in natural capital, we mean, ecosystem services, the benefits that nature provides to humans, but also, the availability of land and how we're using that land, the availability of water, how we're using that water. Other kinds of capital include human capital, the skills and knowledge and abilities that our people have, as well as the healthiness of our people. And so all these things form what you might call a community's productive base and our ability to be resilient and to sustain ourselves over time. And we really need all of these capitals in order to be sustainable, in order to be resilient. My PhD student, Mackenzie Jones, who's a student in our department, Agricultural, Environmental Development, Economics department here at Ohio State, has looked at inclusive wealth and measured it actually at a county level for all US counties. She's looked at the changes in inclusive wealth, and one way of kind of measuring how our ability to be resilient, our ability to be sustainable is to look at the changes of inclusive wealth if we add up the value of all these capital stocks. And if that's non-decreasing, that's one way of defining sustainability. So she's found that I'll just throw out some statistics here. In Ohio, looking between 2010 to 2017, 42% of the counties in Ohio actually declined in per capita, so per person, inclusive wealth. 80% of those declining counties are in rural areas located outside of urbanized areas. In terms of the other 58% who are increasing in inclusive wealth, that was about an even split between urban and rural counties. And this is a little higher percentage than if you look at the, across the US, there's about 40% of counties that are declining in that same time period. Interestingly, if you zero in on Central Ohio and look at the MORPSI region, it's only 27% of counties that were declining. So there's definitely an urban bias to those trends. And if you look at particularly, this question of how to build resilience, we found that health capital was something that was particularly important for counties that ended up in the bottom third of declining counties. 52% of those had declines in health capital. So health capital is really one of those kind of critical capitals that if you don't have a certain minimum level of that, you're not going to be able to build other kinds of capital. And so I'll just conclude by saying that, investing in these capitals and thinking about how we do so in a way that maintains our resiliency, I think really is one way of framing this, this question of strategies and policies for our region. And I'll have more to say about that, but I'll let my other esteemed panelists give their opening statements.
Thank you very much. Great, thank you very much. Erin, tell us what the City of Columbus is doing in this area.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harvey, for the invitation to be here today. I'm really honored to be here as part of this panel and with these other amazing women. I think I'm going to learn a lot just hearing from them today. So, but here at Sustainable Columbus and the City of Columbus, our #1 focus really is on imparting equity. And so when it comes to climate, that really means environmental justice, racial justice, really making sure that our residents who are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and who really are already experiencing those effects are going to be benefiting the most from the action that we're taking. We know that it's our communities of color, it's our low-income residents, it's our residents who are in our opportunity neighborhoods here in Columbus who are most at risk. And so for us, our North Star goal around climate is to be carbon neutral by 2050. So the mayor really set that goal for our community at State of the City back in 2020. And that is laid out in our Columbus Climate Action Plan. So we did finalize that plan and released it last December. This is the first climate action plan that the City of Columbus and Columbus has had. It is a community-wide plan and a community-wide goal. So I always like to share that with people. This isn't just a goal for the city and our municipal operations. This is for our entire Columbus community. And we also know that we need to reduce emissions significantly by 2030, which is why in that plan we have a goal that of reducing emissions by at least 45% by 2030. And we really do know that most of our emissions are coming from two places: transportation and buildings and energy use. So those are really important areas when it comes to climate here locally. And certainly big strategies for our community are around shifting to clean, renewable energy, energy efficiency, transitioning to zero emissions vehicles. All of that is going to be really critical to mitigating climate change here in Columbus. But not only does the plan address how we mitigate and stave off impacts of climate change, it really is focused on climate resiliency and adaptation. And that really is reflected in the strategies and actions that you see in the plan. So the goals that we have are ambitious, and certainly it's going to be a challenge as our Columbus community is growing and continuing to grow exponentially. But that also means a lot of opportunity for our community. And it really just underscores how important it is to align these climate priorities. And again, I always just like to go back to kind of those three main priorities, which is equity, environmental justice, being carbon neutral by 2050, and hitting that at least 45% reduction by 2030. We just need to make sure we're aligning all of our partners across all sectors in Columbus around those priorities. So.
Great, thanks, Erin. Kirsten, what's happening at the regional level? Tell us your perspective.
Hi, hi Harvey, and good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be on this panel as well. It was kind of funny as I was preparing for this panel discussion today. It was very timely as one of my staff members sent me an article by Policy Genius that was titled "The Best and Worst Cities for Climate Change in 2022." And the article suggested that Columbus ranked third in best cities for climate change, surprisingly after San Francisco and Seattle. And there were some reasons in their methodology in this. But what the article said specifically to Columbus was that our highest risk factor moving forward is the increase in hot and humid days. And our biggest advantage, and this is a big kudos to the city of Columbus and what Irwin was just talking about, is the preparedness and the strong climate action plan that was put forth by the city of Columbus. So, you know, the Midwest region is an attractive place, and Central Ohio specifically as well. And I wouldn't be here representing MORPC if I also didn't talk about population growth. We are on track to become a region of 3 million people. We grew by nearly 240,000 people during the last census period. And while our growth slowed down a little bit during 2020, we still experienced growth and will continue to be a strong growing region moving forward. And when we talk about population growth, though, in preparation for this panel, I did realize, even though I had thought about it before, that we haven't really studied yet the potential influx of population specific to climate refugees. I mean, it's a safe assumption to make that we will experience population growth driven by climate consideration and probably also job growth. But it would be interesting to kind of look at these numbers, and that's something I want to look into it in the future. Now we have a lot going for us here. We have strong economic growth, as with the recent Intel announcement. And then also over the past decade, MORPC and our partners, we've done a lot of work to prepare for population growth and to really think about development in a more sustainable fashion. I think we're set up in terms of plans and data to transform our region for the better. If you just want to think about some of these major transformative initiatives that we have going on right now with LinkUs, this is really thinking about creating high capacity transit corridors here in Central Ohio. We have the Central Ohio Greenways Initiative, which has a bold goal of adding 500 more regional trails to Central Ohio. We're talking about Rapid 5, which is, you know, creating the largest interconnected park system in the country. We have a regional housing strategy. There's a lot happening here in Central Ohio. But that said, in order to move towards transformation that really benefits all our residents and creates a region that is resilient, we need bold leadership. We really need elected officials who are willing to look forward and make decisions that may be unpopular in the short term, but really leads to these long-term positive investments in the community. And to create real change, we need changes to our policies and regulations to help us move that needle. I really believe, and I've been at MORPC now for 16 years, that we have an incredible opportunity right now where resources are coming our way from the federal government, from the state, from the private sectors. And I'm just hoping that we can use that opportunity as our way to truly build equitable infrastructure. You know, I'm talking housing, I'm talking transportation, broadband, energy, EV charging, that we think about greening our spaces and building out our parks and urban forests, that we're making sure that we continue to protect our natural resources, but at the same time innovate around energy and transportation and housing and all these other places, essentially setting ourselves up as a resilient city. It's great to know that we are third in climate change, but we still know that Midwest communities have experienced unprecedented disturbances from climate change due to the increase in frequency and intensity of extreme precipitation events and flooding. I know OSU estimated that severe flooding in 2019 resulted in over $2.9 billion in property damages and an economic loss of over $20 billion. Now overlay this information on the neighborhood level, and we can really see that these flooding events generated disproportionately negative impacts among socioeconomically disadvantaged communities. So all of this to say, and I'll close my remarks now, But you know, we have a real opportunity to set ourselves up as a resilient region, but that also means we have to make some tough choices and tough strategies to really be transformative.
Okay, thank you very much. And Sandy, so you work in industry. Tell us about industry and business adaptation to climate change. What's going on?
Sure. So thank you very much for inviting me. I will start by saying the reason my lights go out all the time is because we have sustainable goals in the building and they go out when I don't move enough. So if you see me go like this, it's because my lights went out. You know, it's the hardest part about going last is because there's points that everybody made that I could just run off on a tangent with. So I'll try not to do that too much, but it's great introductions from everybody. So I want to clarify kind of one thing about the hats that I wear, because I wear about 10 different hats when I come to these things. And so part of it is running an engineering firm, but a lot of it is also in a tremendous amount of community work that I'm involved with. And it ranges everywhere from the Nature Conservancy at Ohio to poverty work, work with our library systems that invest in trying to help lift children in difficult situations. Kirsten and I have been beating our heads against the wall about housing for a while. I've been dealing with housing issues for years. So there's an awful lot to say. I'll make one specific point to touch on from an industry standpoint, and then we could probably talk about some broader things. The industry point that I would make is that the most pressing issue that industry faces right now is what's most obvious for them. You have to remember that not a lot of people think about climate change on a daily basis. They think about how it affects them. And the way that it really affects a lot of people right now is what Kirsten just started to touch on, and that's stormwater. So where they see the effect of climate change the most and where it begins to affect business decisions and cost of projects and so forth, absolutely 100% is in precipitation. We are seeing tremendous change there in a very short time around how our systems are sized to handle the precipitation events. So without dragging everybody too deeply into that modeling world, basically what that means is the way that stormwater systems are sized is based on 100+ years of data. And that 100+ years of data would have storms coming less frequently and over longer periods of time. So what we're repeatedly seeing now is faster storms, shorter duration. You get an inch of rain in an hour instead of an inch of rain over 6 hours. And so it's a very immediate issue because, again, our systems are sized for longer duration storms. We're definitely seeing some impact of that when we think about how to design stormwater systems, how we size ponds, how we work with municipalities in terms of compliance. So that's one specific thing I want to touch on because that is top of mind. Maybe not everybody thinks about it as climate change, but that is absolutely what we know what is happening with that. So that's one thing I think is important from an obvious standpoint. The other thing I want to share is regarding the area, the Columbus region, there are reasons why we're growing as fast as we are. We're now the fastest growing city in the United States of cities around 1 million. We are growing at a pace that is a decade ago was unthinkable. And there's lots of reasons for it I could talk about, but I would share that one of the biggest challenges, whether it's climate change or any other policy related matter, is truly getting municipalities to work together. We're not set up for that. And I'm just going to say it out loud. Kristen and I do talk about this. You know, we're in a system of government where every individual municipality has their own rules of law, their own rules of how they do things. And that's completely understandable. But what we have to realize is that we're growing as a region, not just as individual cities. So one of the things that becomes critically important is that cities begin to really work together in a more inclusive way, whether it's around homelessness issues, transportation issues, anything that we're talking about. And that's something that is, if we can do that here in Columbus, it would be a rare moment and it would be a great example for the United States. I think there's a lot of people working really hard to try to make that happen so that we can tackle these bigger climate change goals.
Okay. Thanks very much for your opening statement, Sandy, and the rest of the panel. Again, I want to encourage the audience to submit questions into the Q&A, and we'll try to get to those. We would like this to be as much of an interactive event as possible, as much of a discussion as possible. I also want to encourage the other panelists to to question each other as well. They have a interesting interactivity going on here. I'd like to kind of start off with a question that relates to two things. One thing that Kristen said about making decisions that may not be popular in the short run, and then Sandy talking about how communities and cities need to work together. Give us some examples of kind of hard decisions and why community collaboration will help. And that's for anyone. I know focused on Kirsten and Sandy, but I can hear from anyone on this.
No, I'll go ahead because I want to build on what Sandy was saying about data and flooding. I think it's really important to acknowledge that on some of the investment decisions of how they are being informed right now, especially when it comes to address flooding. One of the issues we're seeing is, and I think that's what Sandy was alluding to, is that most of our municipalities are looking backward-looking data based on historical events rather than forward-looking data when planning for and building stormwater infrastructure. And because that's the best data that's currently available, but there's clearly a need for updated local scale information to support water infrastructure planning that can handle future conditions and help communities to be prepared for extreme rain and flooding. We started that in 2015 with the Sustaining Scioto report, where we did a 100-year modeling of, what are the increases in temperature and what are the changes in precipitation. And it's exactly what Sandy was saying. We could say that temperature is definitely going up. All the models were showing in that right direction, in the same direction. But when it came to precipitation events, the models were all over the place, but where they agreed is that they're going to be more frequent and they're going to be more extreme. And so when we're thinking about the hard infrastructure that needs to be put in, our communities are struggling to make these decisions because we're not giving them the right data, but then also we don't necessarily have the resources available for some of these smaller communities to make the changes. And then third, I don't think we're strong enough yet in really pushing some of the more innovative ways of how to reduce stormwater or how to manage stormwater with a natural way through green infrastructure projects and other things as well.
So I can share an example that actually might be really interesting to some of the folks that are on the call that's at Ohio State. If you're familiar at all with the Cannon Drive area and adjacent to the hospital that got moved, there is a specific reason that happened, and we worked on the project, so I feel like I can speak pretty comfortably to it. The reason that road got moved was not to create a park along the river. It was actually to protect the medical center from a 500-year flood. And let me explain that. A 500-year flood is unpredictable. We don't actually have models that can tell you what the flood elevation is for a 500-year flood. And this was a very, very interesting example of a situation where there's massive investment by the university and a hospital system that was very much needed in the community. And investing in that, what they wanted to do was to actually ensure and protect the hospital from an event, God forbid, that could ever really take that hospital down. So there was a desire, by the university to protect that hospital from, again, this 500-year flood. So as we got into understanding that, no one knew what that elevation was. So at EMH&T, we actually had to develop a model that didn't exist to try to estimate what that could be. It actually had to be independently modeled then by the Army Corps of Engineers, and a third time independently modeled by the insurance company. And it was fascinating because even the 100-year data can be difficult. Although we have it, it's not predictive forward, so you're making certain assumptions. So imagine trying to apply that to a 500-year event. And by the way, if we ever have a 500-year event, we have bigger problems. So anyway, what ended up happening in that situation, and it goes to how you deal in a real way with climate change. It's taking risk and trying to figure out how to mitigate that risk. So in this particular instance, there were 3 independent parties looking at model data to figure out what that elevation should be. And ultimately there had to be an agreement that all parties could pick an elevation to live with and then literally build Cannon Drive up to allow that protection against the hospital. So the good things that come from it obviously are the park. I know not everybody got happy with the parking situation. I'm fully aware of all that. But why I bring it up is because decisions like that are incredibly difficult and expensive for institutions to make. And so Ohio State took a big risk to do what they felt was absolutely right to protect a massive investment in the hospital system. Most organizations couldn't do that. What got done there is highly unusual, and truthfully, to the university's credit, as complicated as it was, as we think about smaller projects and how to protect from climate change, the cost of mitigating climate change is the part that people are having a difficult time putting their hands around because we don't really fully understand the scale of it. So I just would share that because it's interesting as we think about these problems, that the big global idea of, there's my light, see, the big problem with climate change, but taking it down to a scaled local level can be an incredibly challenging thing to do. And it's why all these communities really need to work pretty closely together.
Erin, do you have the perspective? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Elena.
No, I'll let Eric go.
Yeah, no, I definitely was going to jump in to say regional collaboration is definitely key when it comes to climate action. And I talked a lot about our Columbus Climate Action Plan, which is specific to Columbus. However, we're working really closely with Kirsten and Morphy and her team to work with our communities here locally to really help ensure that they're adopting similar goals, that we're really all aligned around kind of that key vision. And it really brought to mind to me our Clean Energy Columbus program. So something that I've been really involved with here at the city. I won't get too into aggregation, but at the end of the day, it's a way for localities to contract for energy on behalf of their residents and small businesses. So that's how, the city of Columbus was able to get 100% clean energy to power our homes and small businesses here in Columbus. But what is that opportunity if we can work with, and we are on a path to have that be all Ohio-based wind and solar. So that's what's really exciting about that program, and really is going to help shift, clean energy and help shift the grid here in Ohio and regionally. So how can we work with all of our surrounding municipalities to adopt similar goals and to, have their own clean energy aggregation programs? So really kind of using that market forces to really help shift the market in the clean energy space. So that was really high level because we could talk for an entire hour about how aggregation works. So,
Elena, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on Sandy's example, which I thought was a great one. So it really underscores, I think, the difficulty, but also the criticalness of being able to try to understand what some of those damages might be in the future if we don't mitigate or if we don't adapt in certain ways. And of course, it's all uncertain, as Kirsten said as well. But the importance of being able to use models in ways that project forward potential outcomes. We can never predict the future. The future is by definition unknown. But we can try to project plausible futures. And this is a lot of the work of like what IPCC does at a global scale, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And doing this at more regional scales is something that we're also making some progress on at OSU with some of our integrated assessment modeling work at regional scales, and looking at not just the downscaled climate impacts, but also, to Kirsten's point, how are humans going to and people going to adapt? Who's going to move into the Columbus region as a result of what's going on elsewhere? Where will they move? And what kinds of investments will that entail? There's all kinds of adaptations that we individually make and that communities make, that if we're really trying to project forward into the future to understand and make a case for why we need investments now to avoid those future damages, that kind of scenario planning can be, I think, a really helpful part of trying to get everyone on board with understanding those regional futures.
So there's a question in the chat that I thought I'd spin up here a bit because it relates to the statements you all made about, someone asked about the importance of regional planning related to stormwater regulation. Any ideas on what role regional planning agencies might play in facilitating unified regulations at a regional level? And I want to generalize that to say, well, how do we build these collaborations? Sandy talked about the fact that people had to agree on the elevation for Cannon Drive. How do we get there quicker in a more nimble way, given the shocks that are coming in the future? I'll let anyone jump in. I'll call on someone.
I can go. I was trying not to because I got a lot to say about this. But Aaron, I want to let you go because you're working on reach. Why don't you talk? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I guess I was just going to jump in to say that's a really wonderful question. And I think one that we're still kind of grappling with and dealing with. I know it's something we're seeing here at the city. We feel, at least at Sustainable Columbus, a lot of what we're working on doing is building more collaboration between our departments here at the city, between entities in the community around climate and sustainability, because that is so critical. And I think I even mentioned it at the top, is just making sure that we're really all aligned around our priorities when it comes to climate, resiliency, sustainability, and meeting those goals, and that we're communicating and kind of talking to one another. That was just even some of the notes I had from some of the other questions, I think. That is just going to be really critical, and making sure that we have those processes and systems in place. So.
And so I'll add a different dimension to it. I agree with what Aaron said. I would also say, though, that we know that we are going to be in one of the most disruptive times ever, that certainly any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. And one of the challenges with the way that we function right now is that it doesn't take into account disruption. So we sit here in a situation where it's not just climate change, it's everything. It's social justice. It's the coming through a pandemic. We are in a situation now where we have incredible disruption in the workforce, incredible disruption with students. There is an unbelievable situation ahead of us. And one of the big challenges is that government is going to have to react to disruption. And that is very difficult because government is not built for that. It is built for reaction and systems planning. So I would like to think, and I'm going to remain hopeful here, that there is an incredible amount of drive in this region for private entities, government, and the nonprofit sector to truly work together in a way that you don't see in a lot of other locations. We have many, many, many examples of where the Central Ohio region has been very successful at this, but now we're doing it in a way that has a different sense of urgency to it. And it's not just around climate change, it's about all of the things that are leaving tremendous portions of our population behind. In some ways, and I mean this in a very honest way, it is a bit of a luxury to sit and talk about climate change. There are people who can't even think about what that means because they are homeless. They don't have work opportunity. They can't get to their jobs. And so we've got to think about all of the people who need to be lifted in the course of talking about climate change. And that is going to require disruptive government. It's going to be difficult. I don't want to make it sound easy because I don't think just collaboration is going to cut it. It's going to have to be sharing money, sharing resources. And the last thing I'll say about it, there is an opportunity here. We're going to see more federal money than we have ever seen flowing into the communities in a way that can allow us to do this. The federal government is not going to be the one that makes that happen. It is going to be local government who use those funds for good. And I think if we in Columbus can do this in a way that is truly disruptive in our collaboration, we can do some things that have never been done before, but we got to get super uncomfortable in order to do it.
I think I'm just going to repeat what Sandy just said, just in different words, because I couldn't agree more. I mean, we really need to learn from the last 2 years. It clearly highlighted the inequities in our community, and it also highlighted the need to be nimble, as Sandy pointed out. And especially when it comes to local governments, we have to figure out how to help support them so they can update their processes and their policies so that they are less bureaucratic, but more flexible and adaptable to changes in the market and what's coming down the pipeline. And I know sometimes that scares local government, but it doesn't mean that we want to loosen all regulations, but it simply means let's find ways to work with the private sector and innovative solutions that are sustainable and that advance sustainability and equity goals too. I mean, this goes as much as requiring trails in front of new developments, or thinking about energy efficient building standards, or requiring specific square footage or units per acre, thinking about innovative building materials. This is really an important part where we can strengthen our communities through investments as well. And then the other piece I would want to echo is, because I think your original question was about how can regional organizations help facilitating these conversations. MORPC is certainly well equipped to facilitate these conversations. We have no authority in terms of what local governments actually put in place. But we are at the table, and we always try to bring good data and best practices and information to our local governments. And in some cases, think about LINCUS. This was originated by an Insight 2050 corridor study that eventually went into implementation because our local governments clearly understood the need for more denser, walkable, bikeable development that's focused around high capacity transit as well. And right now, as Sandy said too, is the opportunity to have these conversations because we can back them up with funding. You know, having these conversations and saying this is the things we should do is not gonna help if we're not gonna be able to support them with the resources down the road.
So here's a related and tough question from the audience. Someone mentioned earlier about politicians needing to make sometimes unpopular decisions. How do we press our community leaders, our politicians, to be brave, to be apolitical and follow the science and make the best decisions for the most people, rather than listening to the loudest few?
Well, we need a voting rights map that works for the state first.
Okay.
I mean,
Certainly.
we have an unfair voting system in Ohio, so it's going to be very difficult until that gets corrected.
Yeah, I think understanding the whole behavioral aspects of this is critical because as I think scientists have become very humbled by, you know, realizing that we can't just state what the science is and expect that to be the objective truth or to be viewed as the objective truth. So it's clearly a much more complicated situation than that. So, you know, really understanding what it is that motivate people, that people value, and then finding those things, those commonalities that we can talk about. And, you know, everybody values health, everybody values education, everybody values opportunities for green space and experiencing nature. And so, you know, what are those common kind of investments that could be made around which we could generate support? You know, I would love to be able to say that, you know, based on our modeling and our forecasting, we could convince everyone of what's going to happen in the future in terms of, you know, the really awful, horrible damages that, and, you know, real extreme costs to people that will happen if we don't make these investments. But, you know, getting everyone on the same page with that, I think is not very possible. So thinking about, you know, more from a carrot point of view, what is it that we can do now that's going to generate immediate kind of co-benefits and also address climate resiliency?
I would love to talk about this some more in general, you know, not on this panel right now, but this is something that we're exploring at MORPC of how can we help have those educational opportunities. Because when you think about a lot of our elected officials, they're going in there very much new to that field. They're going in there because they're very passionate about one thing and they want to help the community move that one thing or several things forward, but they don't have training on how to stand up or have the conversations with the public. And so is there a way that we can partner with OSU or other organizations to help educate and support those elected officials of how to have those conversations and how to feel more bold? I mean, I don't think we have to discuss this now, but this is really something that I feel very strongly about that we should, you know, at least tackle fairly soon and offer some programs.
No, actually, I want to address that now because this is one of the questions I had, and I'm going to direct this at Elena first, but the whole panel can also chime in. We talked about community partnerships at a regional scale. We talked about industry and government partnerships. What's the role of the university? I mean, you direct a big sustainability institute on campus with a large remit towards sustainability science and also practice both on campus and beyond. I direct an urban center on campus. What should we at Ohio State be doing in your view? And I'd like to hear from our panelists as to what, the same question, what should we be doing?
There's a lot that we can be doing, and I would hold you up, Harv, as a role model, because I don't know if everyone knows, but he just got the Engaged Scholar Award from the university. And I mean, it truly is, yes, it truly is the direction that I think we're moving in, that our university leaders want us to move in, and that frankly, many individual faculty and certainly students want to move in. And so, getting away from the traditional idea of academics being separate from society, being separate from our communities, towards something that is much more about embeddedness, and scientists and scholars and learners being embedded in communities, and for that learning to happen in two ways. The old model of the land-grant university and extension is that we are, quote unquote, extending the knowledge that we generate out to the communities. The reality is that we have as much to learn, if not more, from communities as they have to learn from us. And so it's really a co-production model that we're trying to engage more and more in, and want to engage more and more in. But how to do that is complicated because no one has enough time to do this well. It really requires durable, persistent partnerships over time, and really building the social capital, in our local communities and regionally as well. And those are the kinds of things that we're working at and want to do more of, and looking for opportunities to do more of. I think also, to Kirsten's point, the training aspect of this is also huge. I mean, we have a real, I think, obligation and opportunity to open our doors much more widely to offering education opportunities to people in communities, and through online learning, which we're all now very familiar with, we have those kinds of opportunities. We can do lots of creative things there.
Would others like to comment on that?
I can offer one thing. I really appreciate what you just said. I want you to know Ohio State actually is absolutely at the table on a lot of conversations. Dr. Johnson and I both served together as members of the Columbus Partnership, and she has been absolutely involved in a tremendous number of initiatives wanting the university to play that role. So I think it's great. It's happening. Denison University, by the way, is there as well, which is important to know. But in addition to that, the role that universities, I think, historically have played has absolutely changed, at least here in Central Ohio. The conversations that are happening are much more inclusive of not just business and university and government, but also the nonprofit sector. The West Campus Innovation District is a good example of a lot of regional collaboration around future technology and the way that we can begin to think about problem solving. That's a university decision. I mean, it was an incredibly amazing moment for the university to head that direction, but the effects of it are pretty deep reaching into the community. So I actually think the university is doing excellent work in that way already.
Okay, great. Glad to hear that.
I didn't even go there.
Thank you, Sandy.
You still could.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay.
I would also just point out that a lot of that is because of the partnership opportunities that have been created over time, right? Some of this investment, for example, with NG, who is our energy partner at the university, is possible because of the partnership there.
Okay, I'd like to make this a little more real and talk about specific investments that we should make. And I'd like to ask, what do you think? I'd like each panelist to respond to this. What do you think is a big priority in both hard and soft infrastructure? Soft meaning like social infrastructure, to adapt to the future while making our region more equitable and just. And I want to tell a little story before I a small story before I open this up. We had a previous speaker from Portland State University, Vivek Chandis, and he talked about that even like Columbus right now is doing tree canopy master plan in order to increase the tree canopy. He says that can be somewhat controversial, at a neighborhood level with some like, for example, neighborhoods fearing investments such as that, or maybe even bike lanes or bus rapid transit or something, is a harbinger of gentrification, for example, and displacement. So how do we do this? What investments should we make, and how do we ensure that we improve social equity? Erin, we'll start with you. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, I love this question. And I didn't really get to answer the university question either,
please.
But we certainly value our partnership with our local universities and Ohio State especially. We do have a lot of collaboration with that. And I just think it's critical to be partnering with the universities to help do that, research that's needed in this space that's really going to help inform our policies and decision making. But to get back to your question about infrastructure, this question, there are certainly a lot of investments that need to be made in the hard infrastructure space, but because specifically asking about adaptation and making the region more equitable and just, it really brought to mind for me the concept of resiliency hubs, which is something that we're really committed to here at the city and with the Climate Action Plan. It's sort of a new and emerging concept in the sustainability realm, but I think it's a good example of how critical both that hard and soft infrastructure can become, and really help us provide a more just and equitable future. So a resiliency hub, just to get into it really high level, it's really a physical space that exists in the community that really is there to support the community's physical and social well-being. And the whole idea is that it is set up to operate during normal modes. It's helping support the community and their needs. It's there during disruption, so it would be prepared to really, handle any of those future impacts that we might experience because of climate change, so increasing heat, rain, storms, and then it helps the community recover. It's really set up to make sure that it's helping that community recover equitably, and really focuses on what programming it's offering to the community, structure of the building, making sure that that physical space is resilient and meeting operational goals, looking at the power of the building. Is it being powered by clean energy? Does it have backup power and generation? Maybe a microgrid set up, that there's communications built in as well as operations. So
can you give us some specific? Wait, sorry. Can you give us some specific examples of how Resiliency Hub would work? Like what type of programming? What would the building offer? Things like that.
Yeah, so we actually did a pilot resiliency hub for the Linden Community Center. And so really, I know our Rec and Parks Department did a lot of work with the community to build out what kind of programming and services do you want to see at this rec center. But then also really looking at where is the power coming from, it has on-site solar, making sure that there's backup generation. And then again, it's really about thinking through, and it's been a while since I've looked at it. And like I said, we're still kind of at the beginning of this journey of thinking about what these resiliency hubs could look like throughout the community. But it brings to mind to me, if there's a heat wave and for some reason our power grid goes out, can those hubs set up throughout the community really be there to meet the needs of the surrounding community? Can they serve as cooling centers? Maybe they have backup generators that can be distributed to residents.
Got it. Thank you. Others, what type of investments do we make and how do we make them so that we're not increasing social polarization?
So I would like to suggest the idea that other states have done, including Alaska, Texas, North Dakota, other kind of, resource, non-renewable resource heavy states, which is the idea of a sovereign wealth fund in which you're, taxing the extraction of these non-renewable resources, which Ohio does. We have a severance tax associated with a variety of different resources. The difference with a wealth fund is that those monies are accumulated over time and they're invested, and so they grow like a fund, and it becomes essentially like a trust fund for whatever is needed. In some cases, this is a fund that goes to support education, either at the K through 12 or university levels. In other cases, it's a fund that goes to support infrastructure investments in our built infrastructure. And so the point is that, as we're extracting natural resources, we're diminishing our natural capital, but we can use some of the proceeds from that activity to then reinvest in other forms of capital, including our social capital, our human capital, and our built infrastructure. And so I think that idea, and we can also grow that fund over time. Some might be familiar with Norway. They have like over $1 billion, in their fund now, and it's been in operation since 1990. So I think that's one example of how to generate the investment that's needed.
Interesting. Kirsten.
I think, the one thing that I would add to what everyone has said already is in terms of hard infrastructure, when you think about the amount of money of your income, where it goes to, the largest amount goes to housing and transportation. So if we really want to think about creating more mixed income communities and being intentional about it, and then also building out our non-car oriented transportation system, right? Building out trails and bikeways and sidewalks and transit so people have choices to get around without having to use or having to rely on a vehicle. When I came here in 2003, I was already 27. I'm aging myself right now. But I had never owned a car, and I moved here, and the first thing I had to do was buy a car. And ever since, every time we had bought a car, I cry because I hate buying cars. But I have to rely on it for certain trips. And so how can we make sure that people have choices on how to get around and don't have to make a car payment? And then how do we build our community that they're truly becoming these 15-minute cities where people can reach all these key amenities within 15 minutes, walking, biking, or transit? And I think, to me, as we're thinking about not rebuilding, but reinvigorating this region, we really need to keep kind of those ideas in mind.
I need an hour.
You don't have it.
I know we got only a couple minutes. I'm going to try and make it quick because honestly, your question is really an important one. And I don't want to diminish the importance of it with a quick statement, because it matters a lot. I would say we are already socially polarized in a very significant way that is deeply concerning. So again, I'm going to go back to disruption. I don't think we can continue to think the way we do and think that we're going to fix that problem. We have to do a better job of really understanding how people live and work in our community. And one of the big risk points is, as we grow, that ability to work in upscale employment for people is going to mean traveling greater distances. So we have a huge challenge with our transportation network, and Kirsten and Morpsey think about this all the time, but she made an excellent point. Morpsey is great at think tank. They can't enforce it. And so we have got to stand behind the work that Morpsey is doing in a more enforceable way to convince communities to engage in this. So this is something I spend a tremendous amount of time on, and it wakes me up at night. And that's why I don't want to be glib about a response, because it's a really big deal. The one little quick suggestion I would love to see us be able to do, we had a tree canopy plan for Columbus. We've had one for a long time. Prior administration, it fell apart. And a part of the reason is because, believe it or not, it's a very controversial thing. And it's sort of shocking to think about that. But we have one of the poorest urban tree canopies in the nation. It's stunning, but it's the truth. Wouldn't it be great through our carbon credit program? Right now, when energy companies buy carbon credits, the Nature Conservancy, for example, will sell those credits. And the on-the-ground work is happening in Central America. Wouldn't it be great if we could buy carbon credits in this country and use them for urban tree canopy? So I'll just throw it out there. I'm not sure I know exactly how to do it, but it doesn't get over the controversy. It's a funding source. So I appreciate the question. I really wish we could talk about it more, because we have a wonderful community here, but we have real gaps, and we have to be willing to look in the mirror and try to correct those gaps. And I do think we can do it.
Great, thank you. We just have 1 minute left, so maybe I'll ask if anybody else wants to jump in with a final statement, quick take-home message for the audience. Erin, you go first. Sorry, put you on the spot.
Gosh, no, that's okay. I was going to say something I was thinking about and I definitely agree, and I think we at Sustainable Columbus agree with Sandy on kind of disrupting and thinking about doing things differently, and that we need to do things differently. And I guess bringing it back to the equity and environmental justice piece, we're really looking at, and I'm not saying we're going to get it right out the gate, but really trying to co-create solutions with our communities, with the residents who are going to be most impacted by climate change. And it really is ultimately about shifting some of that decision-making power into their hands. So that's when I say like disruption, that's really what I mean. And that really is doing things differently here at the city. So it's going to be a challenge, but definitely something I think collectively as a community, not just at the city, but with external partners and other organizations, that's something that we're really going to have to be doing as a community in order to be successful.
Great, thank you. Kirsten, quick take-home message.
Quick take-home message. I'm just thinking about, there's a lot of conversation going on right now around Intel. And from all accounts, I just attended a forum yesterday again, that Intel is a pretty incredible company that does have strong sustainability goals. But there's no doubt that this facility will impact a large footprint and consume potentially large amounts of energy and water, and also create a lot of traffic and as the infrastructure is being built out, and therefore greenhouse gas emissions. So it can be kind of overwhelming to think about it, but we can also switch it around and see how can we use that momentum to frankly have this larger discussion at the region to set a new standard of how we develop as we're bringing in new development to Central Ohio in a way that is sustainable.
Okay, and finally, Elena, tell us.
Support the idea of co-creating the solutions with our community partners, whether that's the private sector, the public sector, nonprofit sector, because that's the only way those solutions are going to get implemented, if they're owned by the people who are affected and who can make the change happen. And I think that universities play a critical role in that. The other thing I would say is, to Kirsten's point about being able to understand these impacts, universities are large campuses in and of themselves, and we have great opportunities for living lab and studying what can happen with new technologies. Our partnership with ADS on looking at stormwater management issues is one example of that, happening also in the Innovation District. And so I think the living lab opportunities from a student training and education point of view are also fantastic. So I see that as another way of co-creating solutions with our community partners.
Okay, great. Thank you all. I said this would be an excellent panel, and you've lived up to my hype. So thank you very much for your viewpoints. I think everyone really learned a lot, including me. And everyone, this is our last event for spring 2022. Again, stay tuned for our events this summer on the impact of Intel in Ohio, and where we'll address some of these issues. And in the meantime, everyone, take care always, be safe out there, and be sustainable and resilient. Goodbye, everyone.